SAS programmer and biostatistician. Sir has completed his graduation and post-graduation in statistics from BHU. I welcome you, sir, and now I request Mr. Santosh Kumar to deliver his keynote address. Over to you, sir.
Am I audible? Hello? Yeah.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Just let me know once my screen will be visible to you.
Sir, can you just hold your mic a bit up?
Is it visible? Hello?
Yes, sir, it is visible.
Okay. So thank you all for giving me opportunity to speak today with the stalwart like Dr. S.N. Dwivedi and Dr. C.M. Pandey. It is really my privilege to speak on the National Statistics Day, remembering the genius of Prasad Chandra Mahalanobis. It is also very special because I am not from the academics and I have not done even the basic research degree, which is PhD, and speaking in front of all, like Professor Sim Pandey and Dwivedi, who are the pioneer in biostatistics field in India. So even if I will be, I will request you both, sir, and to all, if I will have not, I will commit some error or some discrepancy. Please forget me in advance. When I remember Professor Mahalanobis, one of the things which I really fascinate about his association with Professor Ramanujan at that time. He was a student at Cambridge, and I have read many anecdotes and their good time they have spent together. I think they have with some account and with some biography. This is also shared.
संतोष, तुम्हारी आवाज बहुत धीरे आ रही है.
अच्छा.
हो सकता है हम ही को आ रही है कि तेज सभी को.
Is it better, sir?
आवाज तुम्हारी बड़े धीरे आ रही है.
अभी भी कम है सर.
हाँ, अब थोड़ा ठीक हुई है.
अच्छा, पता नहीं. एक बार इज इट बेटर सर? अभी ठीक है?
यस सर, अभी सही है.
ओके, ठीक. तो कुछ माइक में प्रॉब्लम हो सकता है. So the one of the fascinating things which we have seen, which we have learned from the different movies and biographies, the association between Mahalanobis and Ramanujan at the Cambridge. So they used to discuss about the zero and infinity and how these symbols can be articulated and manifested in the Indian philosophy. So if you people are interested to know how these things are, their collaboration and their puzzles has been solved and their fun and their life in Cambridge, you can refer some of the best biographies has been written by the Cambridge mathematician and statistician at that time. Today, what we are trying to discuss here, my experience with the biostatistics field for last 13-14 years, I have been associated with the clinical trial and biostatistics field. So how, as a young statistician, pass out, you are supposed to pass out from the BHU this year, and those who are in previous year or maybe in graduation, if you are planning to join industry or maybe academics, because the biostatistics is the field where academics and industry are collaborating in a very nicely manner, and there is hardly any principal biostatistician or senior biostatistician in the field who doesn't have PhD or research degree. So this is very interesting theoretical as well as the applied field you should be venture upon. So I will share some of the experience which I have gathered during my exposure with my corporate and professional career. So I will discuss elaborately about what is the role and scope and advancement is happening in biostatistics in drug discovery and clinical trial field. So in the next couple of slides, I will discuss the new opportunities and the new challenges which has been posed by the industry and how academician and the industry are dealing with this. The another thing which is very upcoming in the market is health analytics, and that is the basically non-clinical health analytics. When I'm saying non-clinical health analytics, it is basically it is not it doesn't deal with the clinical formulation or maybe the drug discovery or with the clinical trials. It is basically the pricing of the models, integrating different database, integrating the pricing database to the prevalence database to the customer database to the insurance database, and give you the best personalized option to explore and access the affordable medical treatment into your area. So one of the key uses of the healthcare analytics is basically the predictive analytics, and using predictive analysis, the healthcare analytics basically set the benchmark for the access data, performance measurement of a particular drug or surgery, improve quality through the statistical validation and decision support modeling. And there are lots of new advanced statistical tools and exploratory data analysis through the National Registry of the medical statistics that's collaborate that explore the basically new way to affordable medicine. Used in clinical trial analytics. The one of the new field which is coming in the reimbursement, payout, claims, repricing, and access analytics. So this is basically for those countries where the health insurance and the public health infrastructure is in the private mode, and government can send you the claim, can reclaim your reimbursement or reclaim your payout, or if the drug is already into market, if the government is, so for example, if we have a 4 or 5 vaccine, and government is supposed to purchase and procure the vaccine and distribute at the public health level. So what is the repricing, what is the price negotiation they have to do with the serum, what is they have to do with the biopharma and other Pfizer and BioNTech. So this is called the repricing, access, and payout claims. So Canada and US are one of the market where health insurance analytics dealing with the repricing and access model is very much important. So those who are interested to explore their career in health sector, it is not mandatory to only do the biostatistics thing. They can do the other healthcare analytics. If they are interested in predictive analytics, they have to do the logistic regression and advanced analytics. So they have their choices to non-clinical health analytics also. And the best option or best the model or the best institutions we have are Optum and United Health Group. So I think we have done in previous year, there are some placement on the Optum and UHG. So those senior who are working on Optum and United Health Group, you can consult them and understand what is the statistical application they are using into the health analytics. The other application in healthcare of statistics is basically when we are developing the new diagnostic method or we are developing the questionnaire. So there are lots of clinical trial where we are using the questionnaire instead of the clinical endpoint. When I'm saying the clinical endpoint, it means that we should have a biochemical or biomedical biomarkers to measure the efficacy and safety of the clinical efficacy. But sometimes we cannot measure the efficacy through the clinical endpoint, like psychological depression, or maybe the whole range of the trauma or mental issues. So there is hardly any biochemical or any diagnostic parameter which can be measured clinically to prove where the drug is effective or not. So for that kind of trials, we have a new set of field which is called quality of life questionnaires and other statistical questionnaires, which is a separate field. So those who are interested in qualitative data analysis and qualitative statistical building, they can go for the statistical validation of the quality of life questionnaires, which has been developed and validated by many prestigious statistical consultancy firms and institutions, which one of the important questionnaires development agency is EORTC, which is the European Organization for Research and Treatment of Cancer. So all over the world, the quality of life questionnaires for the oncology trial or the cancer trial has been developed by the EORTC. So those who are not interested to go directly to the core biostatistics, they can go to the diagnostic method and questionnaire development field also. And there are students in my batch also, and into my juniors and seniors also, they are not very much interested to do the very hardcore inferential or Bayesian statistics, and they are more prone to, their inclination is more into the programming. So they have also a very vast and rich field, like the Professor C.M. Pandey have explained in a very elaborative and nice manner how an artificial intelligence and machine learning is changing the whole healthcare scenario. And those who are very much interested into the programming and advanced data programming language can explore the computational statistics field. One of the field related to very closely related to statistics is basically statistical programming. So where I'm just explaining you, there are three kind of role in clinical trials or clinical programming field. One of that is statistical programmer, another is statistical analyst, and the third is the biostatistician. So statistical programmers are responsible to implement the programs that logic was developed by the biostatistician. So if biostatistician has decided that this kind of endpoint or this kind of variable has to be analyzed by Cox proportional hazard model, so or maybe the Kaplan-Meier method. So this has to be implemented in programming language by a statistical programmer, because biostatistician will not be going to write a 1,000-line piece of programs, because that is a very manual or maybe intense labor intensive work, and biostatisticians are usually need to invest their energy and techniques onto the statistical method and techniques rather than to a deep programming. Also, the new age of big data and artificial intelligence, machine learning and deep learning has been evolved, and how they have been using, they are getting used in clinical trials. I have couple of slides in next couple of slides. Then I will explain how this whole new techniques is completely changing the whole scenario. And then we have a simulation and modeling field where through the simulation exercise, we generate the dummy data, we analyze based on the simulated data through the normal distribution or maybe the specified distribution. And then we have a whole field of mathematical modeling which will be used to predict, analyze and forecast the different statistical or clinical scenario through mathematical modeling. So now you can see, I am very much sure you are getting exposed with the disease outbreak mathematical modeling analysis through Twitter or maybe through social media. So most of the modeling of the COVID outbreak is basically done by the mathematical modeler or statistical modeler, and this is very exciting field. Those who are interested to very much deep dive into the simulation and modeling exercise, they can explore this field also. One of the field which is very much new into these days due to the pandemic, due to the COVID, is public health and population statistics. So this is the trend in BHU. I think for last 30 years, couple of students after completing their masters used to go to International Institute of Population Science, IIPS Mumbai. So their role and their expertise is basically to perform the large-scale public health survey, to estimate the burden of disease, to estimate the prevalence rate of a certain disease, to basically estimate and give the direction for the vaccine coverage and compliance. And one of the leading work of IIPS is basically National Family Health Survey. So if you'll go through the NFHS different rounds, you will see how elaborative and exploratory data analytics has been used to basically tell the public health statistical estimates. Now, one of the concerning and maybe joining field of the same department is epidemiology and mathematical disease modeling. But now epidemiology and mathematical disease modeling is separate department in most of the leading university. You must have heard the name of Bhramar Mukherjee, who is a biostatistician and epidemiologist at the University of Michigan. She is doing the fantastic analysis of the pandemic data for India, and her prediction and model are giving such an accurate and precise estimate. So one of the major contribution of the Professor Bhramar Mukherjee is to give the state-wise outbreak data analysis as well as the predictive figure for the corona outbreak. So those who are very much interested to epidemiological and mathematical disease modeling can explore this field also. One of the important field in biostatistics is basically the late phase post-marketing trial. So you must be aware there are not such much new molecules available into the market. So whatever the new molecules has been developed, that has been developed, and now the clinical trial and biostatistics industry is going through a saturation phase in terms of the new molecule. So there are huge new market for the late phase post-marketing trials where the pharmaceuticals products or drug has already been developed, and we are doing the post-marketing surveillance study to explore the post-marketing real-world evidence of that particular product. So in that field, the basic major category is kind of chart and registry review. The registry review is basically the national registry of the database of a particular disease. You must be aware that we have a national COVID registry developed and maintained by National Institute of Medical Statistics. So that gives us the trend and overview of the disease prevalence rate as well as the baseline demographic and clinical characteristics of the COVID at different point of time. There are health economics and outcome research analysis also, which basically deals with the pricing and value for health in terms of the clinical trials and pricing of the pharmaceutical products. Then pharmacoeconomic and pharmacoepidemiology modeling is also very much into fashion, basically in Western countries and Europe and US, Canada, where basically you have to predict and model the value for health, insurance claims, loss of your working day due to any disease, and any claim to the hospitals or to the government or to the insurance agency to basically explore your optimum solution for best treatments. Pharmacoepidemiology is basically a field where you are assessing the safety and efficacy of a drug based on their clinical, medical, statistical, and their pricing methodology. So what is the optimum way to perform a treatment under a hospital setup or a clinical setup or in a large or super specialty hospital or a government setup? So this kind of things you will explore through the pharmacoepidemiology. The real world evidence study is basically a new study, new analysis once the drug has been developed into the market. So what is happening at the real world? What is the clinician prescribing, and how the once the drug has been reached to the market, and what is their effectiveness, safety, and pharmacoeconomic profile. So if you want to explore this kind of things, because the clinical trial setups, the drug discovery happened in a very controlled manner. Their eligibility criteria and other things has been restricted, and then you will, whatever the estimate and result you are getting in a very restricted and controlled manner. But once drug is into market and you reach to the common people, how the drug is behaving, how the drug's compliance has been maintained, and how the drug's pharmacoeconomic parameter is performing, it needs to be analyzed in real world setting. So then real world evidence setting is one of the very important studies. So those who are exploring their career in post-marketing trials, they can get exposed to this kind of study. And then, like Professor Devedi said, the systematic review and meta-analysis is one of the very important things to basically analyze the large scale database to get the meta level data analysis. So it is not based on the only one trial or two trial. So it is basically as a bulk data analysis based on the certain restricted or filter criteria. So then you will able to know how uh, the drugs or a particular clinical parameter is performing at the large scale data analysis level. So this is the top 10 HUR trends. You will see the real world evidence, drug pricing, novel curative therapies, overall healthcare spending, universal healthcare coverage, value-based alternative payments model, price transparency, digital technology, aging population, and precision medicine. So those who know the role of a statistician is only in the clinical trial, that is for those, so that breaks this myth, because the clinical in a biostatistics clinical trial or phase 3 clinical trial is just one field, and there are huge market beyond the uh, typical inferential statistics driven phase 3 clinical trials. So if you want to explore the whole field of healthcare, there are more than enough field to just go for the inferential statistics driven statistical analysis thing. And then there is a new, not new, there is a very upcoming field which is computational biology and genome analytics, because now your precision, because for the cancer trials, for the cancer treatment, the genome sequencing of a particular person is very much responsible for the cure and a diagnostic of the disease. So precision medicine is the branch of healthcare analytics where, based on your gene profiling, based on your gene sequencing, the cure and diagnosis of a particular person will be customized based on their clinical, medical, and genomic profile data. So there are lots of gene tech companies nowadays. We are also engaged with one of the leading gene tech companies, the subsidiary of Ross Pharmaceuticals, who are doing the gene sequencing based precision medicine for oncology trials. And then now a whole branch of biostatistics is coming for vaccine and infectious disease statistics, because vaccine efficacy, geometric mean titer, seroconversion, these all things you are keep listening to the either in your news bulletin, newspapers, social platform, or maybe through your statistics or biomedical journals. So the whole vaccine efficacy and vaccine statistics is altogether different compared to what we used to do in a typical traditional biostatistics model, because the vaccine efficacy is event-based trial, and the challenges in deriving the sample size of vaccine efficacy or seroconvergence is altogether different. I am going to discuss this in next slide, how the vaccine efficacy trial is much more complicated than the usual normal trial. And then we are, when I went last time Europe to one of the leading university in 2017, Düsseldorf University, then I have attended a whole new branch of biostatistics, which is called oncobiostatistics. So there are lots of exciting things happening into the oncology space of the biostatistics, where basically we are predicting and modeling the survival events, and basically the traditional time to event survival model, which is used to be done by Kaplan-Meier estimate or Cox proportional hazard model. So there has been lots of limitation which has been flagged by the many leading biostatisticians, and how to overcome these challenges. This is very exciting new field. So those who are planning to pursue either PhD in statistics or joining industry as a biostatistician, I will strongly recommend it. Either join a oncology based pharmaceutical company like Ross or Merck or someone else, if you will get the chance, because there are lots of really exciting things happening in oncobiostatistics zone, or the something which is really happening very exciting way is the vaccine trials, which is basically you can see how the vaccine efficacy has been measured, how the sample size and design has been developed by different biostatisticians. So this is something which is very much important here. There are already a new branch, which is basically an old branch, but which is called psychometrics. But the usual traditional way was the clinical psychometrics, where we are analyzing, estimating, and modeling the psychoprofile based on the quantitative psychometrics variables. But there are new way or new division of psychometrics where, based on your social choice, your psychological choice, based on your Facebook data, based on your social media profile, the statisticians, mathematicians sitting at the different social media platform, either the YouTube, WhatsApp, Facebook, they are recording and analyzing your psychometric behavior based on the advanced the quantitative psychometrics tools, and then they are predicting your behavior. So if you want to know more about how the new way of psychometrics has been used, or I will say misused by the big tech companies, you should see the movie The Social Dilemma, which is available on Netflix, or you can go through the Cathy O'Neill books, The Weapons of Mass Destruction, or the Steve Barker book Numerity. So then you will able to show how statisticians are so much powerful nowadays with the help of big data, with your access individual level of the data. They can predict what is the next step you are going to take, what is the next movie you are going to say, what is the next meal you are going to take. So this kind of advanced analytics, predictive analytics is happening. And if you want to know this much in details, you should go the Weapons of Mass Destruction books. I will strongly recommend this book. So Professor C.M. Pandey has explained in detail what is the technique of artificial intelligence and machine learning in statistics, and what is the different software techniques methodology we use to do when we are doing the analysis based on this method. So I am just highlighting some of the operational scope and advances which is happening in clinical trials domain through big data, artificial intelligence, and machine learning. So basically, one of the very exciting thing which is happening in the clinical trial through use of the AI ML is risk-based monitoring. So risk-based monitoring is basically to identify the risk based on the trend and identification of the trend and signal detection. So
हमारी आवाज फिर जा रही है.
okay. एक मिनट रुकिएगा सर. Hello, is it better?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So risk-based monitoring is one of the things which is happening into the clinical space, where you use the signal detection and trend analysis to identify the risk and mitigate the risk before it is actually happening. Eventually it will happen. So for example, if you are doing a diabetes trial, so based on the different big data analytics, you know if the person is greater than 50 years of age, and if it is also have a comorbidities like hypertension and some creatinine inflated problem, you can predict if the daily blood glucose monitoring report is going beyond 200 or 250 mg per dl. So this subject or this patient might be occur with the hypoglycemia or maybe some serious adverse event. So before actually this event will occur, you can intervene and mitigate the risk based on the large big data analytics based on the previous profiling of that kind of subject. So this is really a very exciting thing which is happening in clinical trials. One of the things which is happening is which is called remote monitoring. So what is happening nowadays due to the COVID, due to the pandemic, uh, the clinical trial associate cannot visit the hospital setup. So what they are doing is basically they are doing the digital data review through remote monitoring. So basically earlier they have to do the data review through a manual process. They have to match the records of what has been mentioned into the report and what is has been entered into database manually. But now through the statistical outlier detection, missing data analysis, trend analysis, they can identify the risk and inconsistency in much smarter way compared to what has been happened into earlier manual way. So signal detection, like we say, and trend analysis is one of the very much important exploratory area which everyone in biostatistics is exploring. So there are lots of field like endpoint selection, digital endpoint, like Professor Siv Pandey said. There are lots of biometrics or maybe the digital sensor biomarkers available through the different Internet of Medical Things. Now we have a digital machine to record our BP, heart rate, oxygen saturation, and there are lots of imaging technique available. So how to analyze this data to get a proper overview of the subject or patient and get a statistical decision to intervene and mitigate the risk. So this is some of the field which is very much exciting. Hello, there are some disturbance. Could you please mute your mic? Someone. Okay. So in field of recruitment of subject is one of the major challenges. So based on the patient recruitment database of the past studies, or maybe the CTRI, which is the Clinical Trial Registry of India, and use of the healthcare analytics, the patient recruitment and screening failure rate has been ad, addressed adequately. And then there are lots of drug which has been developed for the different indication or therapeutic use, but now with the help of artificial intelligence and machine learning, we can use to the different indication or therapeutic area. For example, we don't have any drug for the COVID treatment, but there are lots of drug which we are using to treat the COVID for the symptomatic indication. So, for example, hydrochloroquine we have started, then remdesivir, and then we have ivermectin, and then lots of antibiotic and antiviral drug. But none of this drug has been approved or developed for the COVID kind of situation. But with the help of the big data analytics and artificial intelligence, the statisticians can identify the cross-therapeutic or off-label use exploration, which means this drug is intended to treat to the different kind of disease, but now has been or it is using into different kind of therapeutic area. Patient compliance and retention is one of the major challenges in clinical trial. So how to retain the subject or patient into the clinical trial? This is also the predictive analytics manner and the large database analytics is also helping to retain and increasing the patient compliance. And also now the revolution what is happening into the clinical trial is basically the hybrid virtual decentralized clinical trial. So what is happening, we are dealing with in the pandemic, we are dealing with the lockdown and non-accessibility to the clinical setup. So most of the doctors now are doing the telemedicine, and even if you have a digital or Internet of Things kind of material, if you have a digital clock, if you have a SpOT meter, oximeter, if you have a BP machine, if you have a glucometer to analyze your daily blood glucose. So what you can do, you don't need to visit every schedule or every visit to the clinical setup. You can do the recruitment at the very first stage, and then you can consult your doctor through telemedicine. If you have all the digital devices at your home place, you can give the data to the clinical trial assistant or clinical trials investigator through WhatsApp or maybe a digital diary. If not, then you can call the diagnostic or lab person to your home, and then he will take the sample and will send the lab data to your physicians. And then, if necessary, then you can only, if it is really urgent and mandatory, then you can visit the doctor's clinical setup. So this is one of the very revolutionary thing which happening in clinical trial, which is called hybrid or virtual trial, where in traditional, where we used to do a physical or regular clinical visit, compared to now what we are doing through the telemedicine and through digital data transfer. So I have listed just the challenges and advancement in biostatistics. What is the major challenges we are facing in biostatistics industry? What is advancement happening? This is not exhaustive list. This is one of the major challenges industry and academics are struggling, and has been major development. There are research, there are publications, but still there are some challenges also due to the proper statistical technique, due to the statistical computational constraint or something else. So one of the thing is advancement and challenges is adaptive trials, where the clinical trial is no longer a fixed design trials. It is a very adaptive, or you can say a flexible design, where the number of subject, number of visits, and type of analysis or type of the endpoint which you are going to analyze can be changed during the trials. And how you have to do it? You have to do basically interim and futility analysis. It means that once you will reach to the certain point or certain visit in your study schedule, you will perform a in between data analysis, which is called interim analysis. You will do the futility analysis, which will give you the basic estimate whether this is mandatory or this is worth to continue the trial or stop the trial. If you have to continue the trial, do you need to customize your sample size, or do you need to change the design, visit, or endpoint of your trial based on the conditional power? So whenever you will do the hypothesis testing, your family-wise error rate should be limited, whatever the level of significance you have assumed or taken at the level at the time of sample size calculation. So if you will perform an interim analysis and you will also perform a final analysis, then you are performing basically two hypothesis testing. So instead of 5% level of significance, your level of significance will be split into two, 2.5 and 2.5, because one is reserved for the interim analysis and one will be reserved for the final analysis. So there are lots of techniques to perform this. What we called in statistics is multiplicity adjustment. So multiplicity adjustment is basically when we have more than two primary endpoint, or we have more than two hypotheses to test, or if we are looking data more than two times or more than one time. So there are lots of multiplicity adjustment techniques available. Bonferroni is one of the major thing which we used to do, but there has been multiple publications which showed the limitation of the Bonferroni. Then we have Tukey, Cephei, Hochberg, and lots of new statistical method and technique. But every statistical method have their own pros and cons. So you have to trade off between the statistical power, or maybe the precision, or maybe the effect size. So how to choose the best multiplicity adjustment technique is one of the very exciting field you should be explored upon. Another field which is very in trend for last, I think, couple of decades is missing data trend identification and imputation. And what is the trend of the missing data? Is it the missing at random or missing not at random? Because we have identified in last couple of decades, the missing data is not just the missing data. It could be a potential fraud. Because if your efficacy result or safety result is going to be worsened compared to whatever has been happened previously. So how to identify this fraud or risk is basically you have to identify your trend of the missing data. If the data of the missing data, if the trend of the missing data is missing at random, then you will apply the different statistical method. And if it is the method or trend of your missing data is altogether not random, then you have to apply the different missing data imputation. So there are lots of missing data imputation methods, which is mean, median imputation, regression-based imputation, last observation carry forward, backward observation carry forward, worst observation carry forward. But one of the most major and most statistically robust method is multiple imputation. So this is very statistically intense, and you need really a very good statistical and programming skill to do the multiple imputation through any of the programming language. SAS have come up with a new procedure called PROC-MI to do the PROC multiple imputation, because you have to do the tipping point analysis and very advanced biostatistics. So how to perform multiple imputation is one of the very exciting field. If you want to explore your career or your academic research in this field, you will happy to know there are lots of exciting research happening in this area. And then propensity score matching, we know if our baseline or demographic or baseline characteristics is not comparable at the baseline itself, then how to comp off or how to weighted to get the unbiased estimate of the unbalanced design. So propensity score matching is one of the statistical technique where you will comp off or weighted the estimate to the unmatched side. So if your trial in randomized control trial, if the drug A is compared to with the drug B, and the male-female ratio is basically 30% versus 70%, and your chi-square p-value is coming less than 0.05, it shows that the gender distribution at baseline is not statistically comparable. So then you have to do some kind of weight assigned to the male compared to the female. So this kind of thing is happening in propensity score matching. But this is also a very vast topic. There are lots of limitations, challenges, and advancement happening in propensity score matching. What is the new thing which is very exciting, which we have developed, we have encountered, is basically the vaccine trials. And vaccine trials is basically event-based modeling. I have been initially served as a biostatistician for Sputnik trials, which is now into the market. And I also have been associated with Serum Institute for last 5 years. So I have a very good exposure to the vaccine trials. And for COVID vaccine trials, what was the major challenges among biostatistician is to predict the event, not the. So what is the peculiar or what is the typical things happen with the vaccine trials? So vaccine trials has to be estimated based on the number of COVID cases or number of the events happening. Number of events will happen in a drug versus the vaccine versus placebo group. So you don't know what will be the event happen, because you can calculate the sample size for you can calculate sample for size based on the statistical estimate based on the disease effect size. Like if you are doing the cancer trial, you can do the sample size calculation based on the median survival time of the past study. If you are doing the diabetes study, you can do the sample size calculation based on the mean change of HbA1c from baseline to 3 months in drug versus placebo and the standard deviation associated with it. But what is the peculiar about the vaccine trial is basically you have to get event. And what is event? The event is basically the incidence of COVID cases. So if you will select 1,000 subjects as a sample size, you are not sure how many events will happen. So if the 1,000 subject will get exposed to the either placebo or vaccine, and you required 100 event. What is event? Event is basically a COVID cases. So maybe or may not be out of 1,000 cases, the COVID cases will be developed in 100%. So basically we have to estimate two things. One is the sample size, which is 1000, and the second is the number of events. So number of events is not directly proportional to the number of subjects available into the trial. So this will depend on the prevalence rate. If there will be the high prevalence rate of that disease, the event will be becoming higher. And if the event is happening at a very low prevalence rate, the 10,000 subject may be not sufficient for 100 trials. So now I am working with the National Institute of Epidemiology on a dengue trial. So one of the Indian pharma company have developed a vaccine for dengue. So I require 120 events for the proper vaccine efficacy estimation and modeling. So for estimating 120 dengue cases, I have calculated sample size of 5,000. But even my trial has been completed up to 3,000 subjects, but only there are 30 events. So I am left with the only 2,000 subjects, but I have to achieve 90 dengue cases, which is impossible to happen. So then I have to increase my sample size, or maybe we have to do some different statistical techniques to reach to the vaccine efficacy model. So event-based modeling, which is basically a different kind of a statistical model, is a very exciting field. If you want interested to explore the log normal, Poisson process, or some event-based modeling exercise, you will be welcome to this kind of field. What is one of the major challenges we are facing in our day-to-day practice is failure of the convergence criteria in most of the small sample size regression model. So when we have a lesser sample size, maybe the quasi-separation of the logistic regression or maybe mixed effect repeated measure model will not converging. So then we have to select the different variance covariance structure, starting with the autoregressive, unstructured, compound symmetry, Toeplitz, heterogeneous autoregressive order 1. So this is one of the very exciting statistical inference area where you can venture how to select the appropriate variance covariance structure to avoid the convergence criteria in either logistic regression model, or maybe you can call the mixed model repeated measure model. One of the important things which is happening in oncobiostatistics is competing risk modeling, because the Kaplan-Meier estimate, which is the traditional and general way to do the survival modeling, is failed to predict survival probability when there are more than one competing event will happen. So for example, if you have a only estimate in your trial, the cancer death is only an end point, but a cancer subject can die with heart disease or maybe some other comorbidities. So if the death can happen more than one region, how to and then they are competing with each other, then the survival probability estimate derived from the Kaplan-Meier estimate will be not a proper statistical technique. So there are competing risk modeling exercise which is flourishing into the oncobiostatistics. If you are interested in that, you can go through that kind of journals papers. Proportional hazard model, which is basically the Cox proportional hazard model, is one of the most used and abused statistical techniques to derive the statistical estimates for the survival probability through the regression method. But one of the challenges is that most of the time, the primary assumption of the Cox proportional hazard model is the proportionality. And you will find hardly any of the statistical data which we collect in day-to-day clinical trials follow the proportionality assumption in clinical trial. So how to avoid this kind of limitation? This is one of the things which is you should really venture out. And then the regression analysis in failure time mixture model, modeling survival data using the piecewise exponential model. So these are some advanced biostatistical problem which we are facing, industry are facing. There are lots of solutions, but still there are lots of debate and constant which we used to encounter in different seminar conferences. So if you are a young statistician, want to explore the biostatistics fields, inference Bayesian statistics in a very deep, you are most welcome in this field because you will be get excited to the kind of depthness and computational skill required to perform your day-to-day routine exercise. And then obviously the whole new paradigm in biostatistics is basically Bayesian thinking in biostatistics, which is altogether a different paradigm how to do adaptive trial through the Bayesian biostatistics, Bayesian parameter, Bayesian naive estimate. So those who are very much interested in Bayesian biostatistics are most welcome to the very advanced pharmaceutical companies. And now the biggest challenges and debate last couple of years is the p-value. You must have heard the scientists rise up against statistical significance. This is the article wrote in published in 20th March 2019 in Nature, and 8,800 prominent scientists, including the Nobel laureates, has come up with the unified letter that we should stop using p-value for statistical significance because p-value is giving a very false detection criteria for most of the clinical trials, and there are lots of debates, controversy happened, and then still the biostatistician have defended the p-value, but clinician and medical person says even there are statistical significance exists through the p-value. Clinical significance has not been achieved for most of the trials. We should be deriving or maybe exploring some new way to reach clinical biostatistics in a more fresh way. So this is one of the major controversies happened in last couple of years, which you should venture. And one of the solution which has been provided by the biostatistical community as well as the life science expert, but this is not the final answer. So what is the way ahead? So they are saying instead of using excess p-value, you should estimate because one of the challenges to use p-value is that most of the time the underpowered or overpowered study will produce the wrong p-value. So like Professor Dwivedi said, for any design of the trial, you should have optimum sample size calculation. If your trial is underpowered or overpowered, that will lead to a wrong estimate. Instead of using p-value, they are saying you should use effect size and confidence interval to give your better clinical and medical estimates. Also, you should use Bayes factor, which is the evidence for one hypothesis compared to another, and what is the odds or risk available compared to drug versus placebo or drug versus the standard drug. There are new statistical technique, which is Akaike information criteria, Bayesian information criteria, Schwarz information criteria, which is also a measure to determine the statistical diagnostics as well as the model fitment criteria. There is new thing which has been mentioned in ICH E9, which is the statistical principle for clinical trial, has been described. The estimand should be used, which is basically a population intervention effect of interest, summary measure, variable. So this is the holistic approach based on this, based on your statistical estimate, clinical parameter, endpoint, hypothesis, design, sample size, and power. So whatever the study decision you are taking, or maybe your inferential decision you are taking, you should take based on the holistic picture, not just on the p-value. I am giving a very interesting example how p-value has been misused into the clinical setup. So if your blood glucose or maybe HbA1c criteria is 10 and your sample size is large enough, or maybe 200 sample size, it is giving more than 95% power. And if your HbA1c level decreased from 10 to 8 point in 3 months, your p-value from pair t-test will come less than 0.005, which means there is a statistically significant difference of HbA1c from baseline to 3 months. But the achievement of 8 HbA1c level is not a clinical significance, because when we are saying a person is cured from diabetic or maybe not in a danger zone, when his or her HbA1c level will be less than 7. So this is the very tricky example, or maybe very classical example, how even the statistical significance has been reached, but there are no clinical significance difference or clinical meaningful difference has been happened to the subject, and mere on the basis of p-value, if we will prove our drug or insulin or oral antidiabetics is working because it has reduced the HbA1c level from 10 to 8, this will not a sufficient evidence for drug discovery or maybe for the clinical trial. So this is some of the role which we use to perform as a biostatistician in clinical trial. We perform and give our inputs in every stage of clinical trial, start from the designing and conceptualization of the trial. Most of the things which has been covered by Dr. Professor Trivedi in a very nice presentation. So I will not repeat or elaborate much, but I will just read out what all statistical deliverables has to be delivered in a biostatistics or clinical trial space. So endpoint selection, statistical inputs to the protocol, power sample size calculation, randomization schedule generation, maintenance of blinding and unblinding schedule, interim and data analysis and data safety monitoring board presentation, integrated safety efficacy annual report, a statistical analysis plan and output cell preparation, final statistical analysis, and there is CDISC dataset conversion. So this is the new standardized dataset happened in clinical trial space. So whenever you are submitting data to FDA or EMEA or any regulatory agency, you should standardize your data in a uniform way, which should be followed by all pharma companies all over the world in a similar manner. So for example, someone is writing male, someone is writing M, someone is writing 1 as a male. So there should be a consistent and uniform way to data represent. So if someone at the FDA or regulatory level is inspecting or reviewing your data, he should know what is the meaning of M. It should be male. It could be male, or it could be metastatic, or it could be anything. So there should be a consistent way of dataset presentation. So CDISC is the way to present the data to the regulatory agency. And the another deliverable is SAS programming for TLG generation, a statistical analysis report preparation, ongoing data review through outlier detection and trend analysis, risk identification, which I have already explained through different statistical signal detection technique, analysis population preparation, clinical study report review, and statistical inputs to the clinical study reports as well as the manuscript. So this is the larger role of biostatistician in clinical trial space, which will start from the designing of the trial to the final publication of the manuscript. So the role of biostatistician in healthcare and clinical trial is immense. I will just show you a diagrammatic way what is the biometric process of clinical trial and how the biostatistician engage each and every stage through the design and management of the data generation, study data definition, conduct and validation, data access and report. So this is the whole biometric process. The biometric process comprised of data management, CRF designing, query generation, data validation, data QC, data cleaning, data export to the database to the final analysis, standardization of the data set, statistical analysis, and finally the clinical study reports with the statistical inputs. So this is the nutshell how the biometric process would look like. And one of the last presentation is that if you are interested in biostatistics in a very exciting way, you should follow some of the blogs of the. Some of the blogs is from the statisticians. Some of the blog is basically by institutions run by the different statistical body. One of the very interesting blog is on biostatistics by one of the very renowned biostatisticians. You should definitely must be bookmarked this in your internet browser and often visit this website to get the recent advancement and development in biostatistics. PSI is basically a statistician in pharmaceutical industry. So this is a worldwide platform and institution where all clinical biostatisticians used to participate in the webinars and their physical events. I have to be used. I am member of PSI, and I have attended their two physical conferences in Vienna and Germany in 2015 and 17. Citel blog is one of the very exciting things in biostatistics. You should must visit, and I think you must be aware there are association which is called IASCT, Indian Association for Statistics in Clinical Trials. If you will go to the website, you will find number of presentations. I think in number of presentations which will give you the clear picture of the process, methods, and statistical technique to describe the how things are happening in biostatistics in clinical trial space. Then there are space is Huge Global, which is basically pharma user group global, and then there is a SPOR, which is called International Society for Population and Outcome Research. So this is also a very exciting page. There are many Google group which they discuss most exciting things in biostatistics space in and day out. One of my favorite is Metastats Google group, which is run by, I think, one of the, I am not able to remember the name, but you should be part of this Metastats Google group to get the real picture. And they are some of the biostatistician, epidemiologist, and mathematical modeler, which I follow for COVID data analysis. Bhramar Mukherjee is obviously the very well-known biostatistician. She is currently with the University of Michigan, and if you will follow her Twitter, the kind of analysis, prediction, and disease modeling she is doing, this is inspiring for all young biostatisticians how to do statistics in a funny way. And the Murad Banaji is mathematician. He is also doing excellent COVID-19 mathematical modeling. He is with the University of Sussex. Rukmini S is basically a data journalist. He is also doing a fantastic job. Girdhar R. Babu is basically he is epidemiologist. Ben O. Goldcare is a very interesting personality. He is a doctor come statistician, and is heading the Center for Evidence-Based Medicine in University of Oxford. And he has written a very exciting book called Bad Pharma, and he has written a whole chapter how statistics has been misused in clinical trial and biostatistics through the confidence interval, overpower sample size, and lots of statistical techniques. So he has a Twitter account, he has a Facebook page, he has his own website, and you can also follow the University of Oxford department link to get the recent advancement in evidence-based medicine. And one of my favorite is Gautam Menon, who is basically a physicist plus biologist, and has doing fantastic disease modeling of the outbreak of the COVID-19 disease. So this is what I have to say. And on the occasion of 29 June, which is National Statistics Day, we are remembering the genius of Professor Cecilia Mahalanobis, who have shown how statistics can be contribute to the nation building, planning, as well as how theoretical statistics can build the foundation of the modern science. So thank you very much. If you have any question, I am ready to answer you all.
Thank you, Santosh sir, for addressing us. It was great to get an insider's perspective into the field of biostatistics, particularly drug discovery and clinical trial from a corporate point of view. Thanks a lot for honoring us with your presence today. Now, we will start the question and answer session. The first question is for Santosh sir. Sir, what is the role of statistical analyst? Is this role a kind of connecting role between statistical programmers and biostatisticians?
Yes. So if you will join any biostatistics firm or any pharmaceutical company, they will give you the role of either a statistical programmer or basically a statistical analyst. Maybe they will call you a biostatistician, but biostatistician is a particularly a senior or maybe the research-driven position. And basically in a reputed firms, if you are not a PhD in statistics, you will not get a job of biostatistician or principal biostatistician. So a biostatistician is basically a theoretical person who will decide the statistical method and techniques to analyze the data. He will write this into the statistical analysis plan, and then the statistical analyst will read and interpret this statistical analysis and methods, and he will explain to the statistical programmer. So you are right, he is the connecting bridge between the statistician and biostatistician and a statistical programmer. But I'm strongly recommending you all, if you are trying to explore your career in biostatistics, either parallelly do PhD in biostatistics, or you should have a strong publication and research field or conference conference and seminar accreditation. Otherwise, you will not get a very reputed position in biostatistical or pharmaceutical companies. Because the kind of statistical problem I have mentioned, it can be addressed only by those biostatisticians who are very good in mathematics, statistics, and statistical inference. You will not able to deal. You cannot solve the Cox proportional hazard model or computing risk with just a master's degree.
Okay, sir. And sir, is it possible to switch from statistical analyst to biostatistics?
Yes, that is the way. So we all have started with the statistical analyst. Maybe we got the designation of biostatistician, but we all at our initial, I have joined as a biostatistician in Tata Consultancy Services in 2007. So we used to take the advice and suggestions from the biostatistician. Our biostatistician, lead biostatistician was Dr. Amitabha Mukhopadhyay, who was professor earlier with the Indian Statistical Institute, Kolkata. So he used to explain what is the statistical method and technique you have to write in a statistical analysis plan, and how this statistical method technique will be appropriate for this kind of data. So this is initial role, but again I am saying, if you don't have the publication in your name, if you don't have a conference and seminar accreditation, unfortunately I have not done PhD, but fortunately I have published in one of the leading publication which is called Nature. So I have one publication in Nature and 3 publications in New England Journal of Medicine. So that is the only way I got to promoted as the principal biostatistician. Otherwise, it is always, you will see all leading biostatisticians in pharmaceutical companies are doctors and PhD in statistics.
Okay, thank you, sir. Next question is also again for you. So we have heard from seniors that statistical programmer is not a good role for statistician in sense of personal growth in health domain. Please comment on that.
So I have already explained, there are plenty of field which it's all depend on the nature and your interest. If you are good in statistical programming or Java, Python, R, so there are lots of opportunities and very good opportunities to explore your career in that direction also. But if you are theoretical in nature, academic in nature, you are too much indulged with the statistical inference, mathematical modeling, distribution theory. If you attended Professor S.K. Upadhyay class closely and have exposure with the biostatistics, Bayesian statistics, then you can explore the advanced biostatistics field very easily. But if you are good in programming, there are lots of fields, there are very good paying job in different companies. The kind of role, the biostatistics and biostatistician are one of the role in whole clinical trial and healthcare industry. There are, the way I have explained, there are pricing, access, late phase trials, artificial intelligence, machine learning, different avenues and field available in healthcare field. So if you are good in programming, you can explore your computational statistics field without compromising on your salary or position. But I will strongly again recommend it if you are
okay, thank you, sir. The next question is to Professor C.M. Pandey, sir. Yes. Yes, sir.
Okay, just no. Okay, please go ahead.
The next question is to Professor C.M. Pandey, sir. If someone is pursuing a doctoral program from foreign universities after masters, will it be a good option in terms of feasibility and accessing good supervisors? Or after doctoral from India, postdoctoral from there will be a good option?
You see, what I feel that Getting a doctoral program is a little difficult directly. If you get a PhD degree from India and then you go for postdoctoral fellowship, you have better opportunities and the route is much easier rather than initially going for PhD. If you have a PhD degree from any of the universities and you go for postdoctoral fellowship, that route is a little easier. Mostly if you are going for PhD from any Indian university to any foreign university, you will have to complete some bridging program for 1 year or 1.5 years, and then you will be enrolled in PhD. So you can save that time.
Okay, thank you so
Excuse
much,
me,
sir,
sir.
for your reply.
Sir, even I have to add something to the similar question. Sir, like the slides you were presenting about the artificial intelligence in medical research. So it was really very much fascinating. At the same time, it was difficult for us to comprehend the same at this stage. So I happened to I was fortunate to come across a few courses like MSc in Health Data Science, which is offered by a number of internationally reputed institutes like London School of Economics and Warwick University. So, as a student of MSc in Statistics, what can we do? What kind of projects or recommendations we shall have to maximize or to increase our chances of getting admission in the top reputed institutes of the world for MSc in Health Data Science?
Sir, your
Sir,
mic
please
is on.
Most of the universities conducting higher education out of our country in the developed world, they would like to evaluate the students on 2 or 3 counts. That what is your specific specialized area. When you are working outside, here we would like to learn so many things together. And there they want to know what is your focus area. And if your focus area matches with your supervisor's focus area or even the department's focus area, and that has current scope of working and one of the challenging areas, then probably you hit the target. But if it is not happening, and if you are talking like a general student, that is, I can do the in this area also, that area also. So they would like to test that what is your expertise and what is your keen interest, and how you can move forward in a particular area in which they would like to promote their research. So it's not that they promote the student, but they promote their own area of research. And if you fit into that stream, you are taken, and if you don't fit into that stream, they don't want to change their focus for the students. That's the philosophy, I think, what they adopt when they recruit people for research and they make the research groups.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. The next question is to Santosh, sir. In case of missing data, we have to face a trade-off between loss of information and error introduced due to imputation of missing values. In case of medical research, where we have access to very little sample data and we cannot afford to have error as well, how do we deal with that situation?
Okay, so before answering this question, I will just I want to address the earlier question how we once can get the admission in doctoral programs in Europe or US universities. So I used to go different conference and seminar in Europe and Canada. And what I have learned, instead of applying directly into the Department of Statistics, you should also apply Department of Public Health, Epidemiology, as well as the medical school. So it is much easier way to get admitted in the medical department of the university rather than going to directly to the mathematics and statistics department. So now there are lots of European universities who are offering doctoral programming, public and epidemiology, where you can do the biostatistics and other research. So I will encourage students who are writing to the different university to also write to public health department as well as the medical college rather than only focusing on to the Department of Mathematical Statistics. So this is one of my advice. The second thing which is for the missing data imputation. So usually in clinical trial, what we used to do is basically we used last observation carry forward. So the last observation carry forward missing data imputation is the method when we have a missing data at digit 4, and then we can compute or impute the data of digit 4 with the digit 3. And if the digit 3 is also missing, then we can impute through the digit 1. So this is the one of the method we used to do in clinical trials, which is very famous, called last observation carry forward method. But now there are lots of objection has been raised by the regulatory agency. Then the multiple imputation method is one of the most advanced statistical method, where you have to do the tipping point analysis, and you have to go detail into the missing data imputation through multiple imputation, how to do it. There are different there are elaborative R package as well as the SAS package for the same, which is called SAS proc MI. This is very intensive in computation as well as very difficult to understand. But there are lots of exciting things happening in clinical trial in terms of the missing data imputation, and multiple imputation is the most advanced and recent things happening in there. What is this technique? You have to go much detail into this.
Thank you,
Thank you, sir.
Can you also quote a real life problem where you experienced during some analysis where multiplicity adjustment is needed? As we know, is only there are situations where multiple testing problems can have impact on type 1 and type 2 error. And how did you overcome that?
So we used to do this problem in a day in and day out manner. So for example, we have a 3 drugs, and 2 drug is for the different doses, and the third one is the placebo basically. So drug A is basically the 50 mg of the same drug, drug B is the 100 mg of the same drug, and drug C is the placebo. So what we have to compare in hypothesis testing is basically A versus C and B versus C. So basically you have to compare 50 mg versus placebo and 100 mg versus placebo, and you are not intending to compare the 50 mg versus 100 mg. So what you will do, if you will perform the A versus C testing and B versus C testing, then your family-wise error rate will increase to 10%, because each level of each hypothesis testing will spend the 5% level of significance for each testing. So to control this kind of setup, the usual way you will do the Bonferroni adjustment in ANOVA or in proc ANOVA, or maybe any statistical method. But the problem with the Bonferroni adjustment is that it will give you the broader confidence interval, and it will also not control the your family-wise error rate in a very equitable manner. So one of the better technique is to do the Tukey adjustment for the multiplicity adjustment. So what is the Tukey do and what Bonferroni do? Bonferroni do all pairwise comparison. So it will do A versus B, B versus C, and A versus C. But you don't need to get any estimate for A versus B. Your hypothesis testing doesn't need to spend your error rate or level of significance for A versus B. But Bonferroni will do all 3 pairwise comparison, A versus B, B versus C, and A versus C. But the Tukey multiplicity adjustment will ask you to comparator or control. So if you will give the control as a placebo, then he will only perform 2 testing, A versus C and B versus C. So your level of significance will only split into 2 manner instead of Bonferroni adjustment of 3. So this is the way, and there are limitation of Tukey problem also. Then you will go to the Hossberg stepwise multiplicity adjustment. This is one of the very advanced and recent techniques. So in what is the happening in Hossberg adjustment is basically you will start with the multiple testing, the largest p-value testing, and if p-value is less than 0.05 for both comparison, then your both drug hypothesis testing is complete, A versus C and B versus C. But if any of the p-value is greater than 0.05, then what you will do, you will go to the smallest, the second largest p-value, and you will compare the second largest p-value with 0.025 instead of 0.05, because now your alpha is split between 5 divided by 2, which is 0.025, So instead of comparing at 5% level of significance, at Hossberg at second level stage, you should compare your p-value with the 2.5 level of significance. So there are lots of, I think, more than 20 multiplicity things, techniques available. The most recent and advanced is the gatekeeping strategy, which is again only available, I think, in SAS Pro, and this is very intensive. Even I have tried to do this 2 times, but I am still not able to go through the gatekeeping multiplicity adjustment. Most of the time, I prefer the Hossberg adjustment for multiplicity adjustment. Is it answer your question?
Yes, sir. Thank you. The next question, any of the guest speakers can take. For modeling survival data piecewise exponential function, how to get appropriate grid of time points required to construct a good piecewise exponential model?
Sir, Professor Pandey, sir, I will.
Pardon? I could not get the question. What?
So, could you please explain? Yeah.
Yeah. What
Sir,
is the question?
for modeling survival data using piecewise exponential function, how to get appropriate grid of time points required to construct a good piecewise exponential function model?
See, my approach for analyzing the survival data means I go from the applied point of view. First of all, when you consider any survival analysis problem, we decide a observation period that is called window of the observation. And empirically, you can decide that what is the period of observation in which you are experiencing at least this event. For example, if you want to have outcome of a newborn and you are following pregnant mothers, right? So what is the natural way that for how many months you will follow these mothers? A very, very simple example. Because the pregnancy is likely to be terminated in 9 months, so your window period is 9 months. And if you want to observe something in the newborn, if your event of interest is in newborn, then you can say that my window period will be about 10 months, right? So any data beyond 10 months is not of your use. But if the data has been collected abruptly and using the model approach, you want to have what is the appropriate fixed time for which the data should be analyzed, that in fact is derived or induced by your application or the clinical situation that is explaining the analysis. So only model-based duration may not be appropriate. What I do in most of the analysis, I decide the problem and see that how much time is taking it actually will be required to experience an event in this problem or the most of these. And if 10% or 20% of events are falling outside that, then you can use those points as a sensor data. So not a problem. But this is the practical approach that we do in most of the survival analysis modeling. And Dr. K.K. Singh may further explain the theoretical aspect of this problem. He's here on the panel.
Hello.
Yes.
Sir, I am asking about like in pace-wise exponential model, basically we use it for when our outcome of interest is means effect of our independent variable affect the outcome of interest over time. Means our effect is varying over time. Then we use piecewise exponential model,
Okay.
and we divide the time interval into a number of sub-intervals in which our hazard rate is assumed to be constant.
Okay.
So my question is that and how can we approach that, in how many intervals, in how many sub-intervals we should divide our whole interval of time?
Means to have a uniform hazard rate over each interval. Right?
Yes, sir.
Then I think the approach should be that you look at the hazard rate, and if you find a drastic hazard rate change, then you change your interval. I think that should be the approach, and you cannot say that all these intervals could be equal, and you may think of unequal intervals as well.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
You are
The next
Switched off. Yeah. You are muted. Dr. KK Singh, you are muted.
the book by CM Suchindran.
सर आपकी आवाज नहीं आ रही है सर.
आवाज नहीं आ रही.
आवाज नहीं आ रही है तो there is some problem with my.
नहीं अभी ठीक हुई है थोड़ी.
You can go the book by CM Suchindran, K. Nambudri and CM Suchindran. If you go by that book, definitely you can have your problem solved. Here they have given good examples of piecewise exponential models. Whether you are getting or not.
Sir, you are not audible properly.
Okay. Okay, wait a minute. Maybe I can use. Previously,
Okay.
I was using my this. Wait a minute. I will use my. Wait a minute. I will use my mobile.
Now I am audible. Now
Yes,
am I
sir.
audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Then I want to say that if you go, there is a book by K. Nambudri and CM Suchindran. And if you find on net, or if you are not able to find on net, definitely we have that book. If you go by that book, in that book they have given good examples of piecewise exponential model, how to use the piecewise exponential model. Okay.
Okay, thank you, sir.
And I will also want to say, if there are 3 days special workshop usually organized by Department of Biostatistics, CMC Vellore, on survival analysis. So this course is really very good. If you people will get to know the notification of this survival analysis workshop by CMC Vellore, you must attend it. So there will get the exposure with all kind of basic modeling exercise related to time to event data.
Okay, thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, sir. The next question is for Santosh, sir.
ठीक है सर, आप अपना माइक म्यूट कर लीजिए, आवाज आ रही है। हाँ, बोलिए।
To be a biostatistician, is it necessary to be a SAS programmer?
So I will say almost. I will not say definitely, but I will say almost. So if you will not able to do the basic statistical or SAS programming, how you will analyze or estimate your data? So you need a basic statistical programming skills either on R or SAS to be a better biostatistician. Otherwise, you have to be dependent on all time on SAS programmer to get your estimates. So it is always advisable to have a good statistical programming skill or a good biostatistician.
The last question of the day is it possible to pursue PhD while working in an organization?
KK sir, please off your mic.
So yes, it is possible to pursue PhD while working in an organization. I was earlier working with the JSS Medical Research, and one of your seniors, I think for 2-3 years batch seniors, Anand, is currently doing PhD in statistics from IGNU, and also working as a biostatistician, part-time biostatistician with JSS Medical Research. There is one institute in Faridabad. I am forgetting the new name. This is with the collaboration with the Department of Biotechnology. So Glenmark and other big pharmaceutical company are sponsoring their biostatisticians to PhD program in that institute. I will post you that institute name and notification. Even when I was working with the JSS, I got opportunity to do PhD from the University of McGill in Montreal, Canada, but I was not able to pursue it due to the different professional engagement. So this, this is very much important. This is very much possible. You can do your PhD through, Guwahati University also, one of our senior, I think Debashish Majumdar have done PhD from there and has also served in a different things. So I think you can do, there are options available. And definitely in foreign, it is always, you have to do some kind of professional jobs while you are doing PhD and vice versa. So this is very much possible here also.
Thank you, sir. I would like to express my a sense of gratitude to Santosh sir and CM Pandey sir for answering all the questions. Now I request Professor K.K. Singh sir to address the gathering.